Welcome back to the program. We are standing by for an update from the Chief of Defence, General David Hurley, as you can see at the bottom of your screen there, on an incident in Afghanistan, an operational incident. It doesn't look like good news. We'll bring that to you at 9 o'clock. But for now, we're going to bring in our political panel. From Sydney, joining me is Liberal MP Paul Fletcher. Thanks for your time. And from Adelaide, Nick Champion from Labor. Thank you for your time as well, Nick.
Morning.
Firstly, on MyEFO, Nick Champion, why is it being brought down so early?
Well, look, I think governments are always criticised by oppositions, no matter what they do. If we brought it down early, we'd be criticised for that, and if we brought it down late, we'd be criticised for that. Last year, Joe Hockey was criticising us for bringing it back, bringing it down late.
Why not in the middle?
Early, but well, I guess the thing about these things is it is in the middle. This is when we deliver MyEFO around this time every year. This is a prudent time to do it. We're obviously going to be accountable to the nation about our savings and about revenue, and about the fact that we're determined to deliver a budget surplus and take the pressure off interest rates. And we've already seen interest rate cuts this year, and we want to see more interest rate cuts if the Reserve Bank feels the need to do so.
But on the first day that we're also getting the receipts on the mining tax, the opposition says that's a bit fishy. Why on this day? Why not even wait a few days, as other economists have suggested?
Well, as I said before, I mean, the opposition will always find an opportunistic opportunity, if you like, to criticise. It wouldn't matter whether it was early or late, they would make these criticisms. I think what they should do is to focus on the, if you like, the meat and the sandwich. They've got their own costings issues to deal with, and they should be open and upfront with the nation about those, about how they're going to make savings in the budget, who they're going to sack and when. We've seen massive job losses in Queensland and New South Wales, massive cuts to education in New South Wales. So the Liberal Party have their own set of accountability issues to meet. The government's meeting ours. We're going to have a budget surplus and ensure low interest rates.
Paul Fletcher, Joe Hockey claims that this is a con job aimed at covering up the deterioration, the full deterioration of the budget.
This is tricky, sneaky stuff, bringing forward MyEFO considerably earlier than it normally comes out, and the reason is very simple. When Wayne Swan promised that he would deliver this year a budget surplus of $1.5 billion, nobody believed he could do it. All the indications are that the budget position is deteriorating on a monthly basis, and so if you rule a line in the sand a month or a month and a half or 2 months early, it makes your task a little bit easier. What he's desperately trying to do is hold off the day of reckoning when he has to admit that they haven't been able to achieve the surplus they promised. Let's remember that Wayne Swan was the man who stood up and promised us last year that there would be a budget deficit of $12 billion, and it finished up being $44 billion. Wayne Swan is the man who's delivered 4 gaping deficits in a row. So Wayne Swan has absolutely no credibility when it comes to budgetary management, and this is a tricky, sneaky exercise to try and bring forward MyEFO earlier than it would normally be, to try and disguise the yawning gap which he is trying to cover up.
But doesn't it give Parliament the additional opportunity to actually scrutinise these changes?
I don't think this has got anything at all to do with parliamentary scrutiny. This has got to do with a sneaky, desperate Labor government which is not competent to manage the budget, which is facing a growing problem in 2012-13 with the gap getting bigger, and they're trying to bring forward MyEFO to seek to disguise the scale of the problem they face. Let's remember that in this year's budget, Wayne Swan is promising revenues of $369 billion. That's up from $330 billion last year. A very implausible revenue jump, and when he promised that there would be a surplus for 2012-13, most credible observers were very sceptical that he could deliver it. The fact that MyEFO has been brought forward in this way is yet more evidence that he's finding it increasingly difficult to achieve the surplus that he's promised, and this is an attempt to try and disguise the scale of the problem by bringing it forward a month or two, so the gap he's got to fill is only accumulated over 4 months rather than 5 or 6 months.
Nick Champion, a whole lot of people are going to be stung by the end of today. What's the justification for that, for this belt tightening by Wayne Swan?
Well, look, clearly the justification of it is good economic management. And we've seen through the global financial crisis, Australia remain as a growing economy, now the 12th biggest economy in the world with a AAA credit rating, high levels of employment during this time while the rest of the world's mired in unemployment, and low interest rates. So the justification is a continuation of that good economic management in very difficult international times. And if you look at Europe, where short-term austerity, the sort of short-term austerity anti-growth policies have been pursued, like the Liberal Party would pursue in this country if they got half a chance, and it's been disastrous. It's been disastrous in Europe, it's been disastrous in the United Kingdom, it's been disastrous where it's been pursued at a state level in the United States. So we see, I see this as a continuation of the government's good economic management in very difficult times.
And Nick talks about Europe there. Why is Europe in such a mess? Europe is in such a mess because governments year after year showed no discipline, ran a deficit year after year, and it eventually caught up with them. The Howard government spent 10 years painstakingly getting the budget position in Australia back into good shape, and then of course this Labor government, this Rudd-Gillard government, has come in and squandered money. It's run 4 huge deficits in a row, and supposedly 2012-13 was going to be the year of turnaround. The fact that MyIFO has been brought forward, as we're seeing today, is an admission that that task is proving to be very, very difficult, and no credible observer seriously expects that Wayne Swan is going to be able to deliver a surplus after he's delivered so many deficits in a row.
OK, I want to turn to the Nielsen poll today, which shows Julia Gillard has opened up a 10-point lead over Tony Abbott as preferred Prime Minister. This is the first major poll, by the way, since her big speech on misogyny to the Parliament a couple of weeks ago. Paul Fletcher, the Sydney Morning Herald headline screams, "Gillard puts Abbott to shame." That's a pretty ugly headline, isn't it?
Well, look, the polls go up and down. We get on with the job of articulating the concerns of the Australian people and holding the government to account. What we've got right now is a Labor government that is completely internally focused. We're seeing books come out raking over the embers of internal disputes, with the former member for Bennelong about to put out a book championing Kevin Rudd and trying to get him back into the leadership. This is a Labor government which is totally focused on its internal squabbles and has lost track of the issues which are of concern to ordinary Australians. The daily challenges of providing for the family, the daily challenges of paying the mortgage, the things that most Australians are concerned about.
It's being described as a post-carbon tax result because, for example, the Prime Minister's approval rating before she announced the carbon tax was 52%. It's now 47%, around the same figure. Tony Abbott was at 50% before the carbon tax was announced. Now he's at 37%. Is that an indication that the anti-carbon tax campaign has failed, Paul Fletcher?
Oh, look, I don't think you can draw any of those kinds of conclusions from the inherent variabilities in the polls. What we are focused on are the issues of concern to ordinary Australians, and one of the things that Australians do wonder about is why politicians spend their times worrying about the polls rather than the issues of concern to Australians. And those are issues like interest rates, like paying the mortgage, like bringing up the family, like building a stronger future for our children. And those are the things that we are focused on in our policy development and in holding the government to account, and we're just not going to indulge in internal analysis of polls.
Nick Champion, is this result enough to see off a challenge from Kevin Rudd?
Well, there is no challenge from Kevin Rudd. We dealt with those issues back in February and they are dealt with. I guess I'd say that I'd tend to agree with Paul in that I think the public don't like navel-gazing on polls, and I think that they prefer us talk about policy. But it is very hard to talk about policy when all the Liberal Party have got is negativity and no released policy. And we still wait for their industrial relations policy, which is kept in a locked box somewhere down in the basement in Liberal Party headquarters, never to be released, or maybe just a week before election day. We still wait on their costings. We still wait on any substantive policy initiatives by the Leader of the Opposition. And instead, what we get when he goes to Parliament is just one negative speech after another, and the sort of, you know, same 3 lines over and over again. So I think the public are tiring of that approach. I think they're tiring of the opposition treating them like mugs. I think they want to see a debate about where the country's going, and in particular I think they want to see an accurate and factual debate about where the world economy is.
Okay, Nick Champion and Paul Fletcher, we've got to wrap it there. Thanks very much for your time this morning. I'm joined in the